right?
Correct, and a duty to do so.
Okay. What happens if Congress interprets the Constitution one way and the United States Supreme Court interprets it another? Who wins?
So if that law is challenged in court, the court has a duty to say what the law is, and with respect to those parties, they'll issue a judgment. So with respect to those parties, they'll win.
I get all that, but who wins?
So in that case, the court would win with respect to the parties. The law would, Congress would be free to pass the same law again.
Given the fact that the executive branch and the legislative branch, the federal government, both have the authority to interpret the Constitution according to your theory, as well, of course, as the courts. Is there any, suppose the executive branch interprets the Constitution one way and the Supreme Court interprets it another way, who wins?
So the court will win when the case comes, the court will win in the sense that it will interpret the law, and its interpretation of the law will be binding on the parties in the case before it. But it's not necessarily binding on future parties. So the executive would be free to try the same thing again with another party.
So are you saying that if the president disagrees with an interpretation by the Supreme Court, but the president is not a party, the president can ignore the Supreme Court ruling?
Patriots,
certainly not.
Welcome back to the channel, your home for unapologetic America First Truth. Today we're reacting to a must-see moment from the Senate Judiciary Committee hearing. Louisiana's own Senator John Kennedy is doing what he does best, cutting through the legal mumbo-jumbo and asking the tough questions that matter. He's grilling Judicial nominee Benjamin M. Flowers for the Sixth Circuit about this departmentalism theory from an article the guy wrote. And folks, it gets straight to the heart of something every red-blooded American patriot needs to understand. Who actually runs this country? The Constitution, we the people, or 9 lawyers in black robes who think they're kings? Stick around because we're breaking this down clip by clip, and I'm giving you my raw, no-filter take as a proud right-wing patriot. If you love the Constitution and you're sick of activist judges, smash that like button right now, and let's get into it. Right out of the gate, Senator Kennedy hits him with it. Do you remember that article you wrote? The nominee admits it was a speech pushing this idea that every branch of government, Congress, the president, and the courts, has an independent duty to interpret the Constitution. Now listen, patriots, this is actually rooted in serious constitutional thought going back to Abraham Lincoln and the Founding Fathers. The Supreme Court doesn't have a monopoly on constitutional interpretation. That's a dangerous myth pushed by the left to turn judges into unelected superlegislators. But here's where it gets tricky, and Kennedy is smart to press him hard. Kennedy asks the million-dollar question: if Congress passes a law interpreting the Constitution one way and the Supreme Court says another, who wins? The nominee dances around it, talking about judgments applying only to the parties in the case. Then Kennedy goes deeper. What if the president disagrees with the Supreme Court ruling? Can he just ignore it if he's not a direct party? This is gold, folks. This is about executive power, separation of powers, and stopping judicial tyranny. As a right-wing patriot, I'll tell you straight.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations, gentlemen. Mr. Flowers, I want to ask you about an article you wrote last year called "The Departmentalism in the Age of Trump." Do you remember that?
I do, Senator. It was a speech that I gave.
Yes, yeah. And as I read it, you espouse the view that each department of the federal government has a responsibility to interpret the Constitution. Did you mean each department or each branch? Tell me about that article.
They'd be synonymous in this context. I was referring to both branches. The theory of departmentalism is the view.
So you were referring to branches?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And the theory of departmentalism, which Abraham Lincoln is perhaps the most prominent person to espouse it, is the view that every single federal official takes an oath to the Constitution and has a duty to abide by it. So you sometimes hear people say that the Constitution is what the courts say it is. And that's not quite right. Every official has a duty to interpret the Constitution. So, for example, if the Supreme Court okay.
I get it. So Congress has a right to interpret the Constitution, right?
Correct, and a duty to do so.
Okay. What happens if Congress interprets the Constitution one way and the United States Supreme Court interprets it another? Who wins?
So if that law is challenged in court, the court has a duty to say what the law is, and with respect to those parties, they'll issue a judgment. So with respect to those parties, they'll win.
I get all that, but who wins?
So in that case, the court would win with respect to the parties. The law would, Congress would be free to pass the same law again.
Given the fact that the executive branch and the legislative branch, the federal government, both have the authority to interpret the Constitution according to your theory, as well, of course, as the courts. Is there any, suppose the executive branch interprets the Constitution one way and the Supreme Court interprets it another way, who wins?
So the court will win when the case comes, the court will win in the sense that it will interpret the law, and its interpretation of the law will be binding on the parties in the case before it. But it's not necessarily binding on future parties. So the executive would be free to try the same thing again with another party.
So are you saying that if the president disagrees with an interpretation by the Supreme Court, but the president is not a party, the president can ignore the Supreme Court ruling?
But he could certainly not ignore the Supreme Court ruling with respect to the parties to whom the judgment applies. But Abraham Lincoln, famous...
No, I'm trying to get drilled down to understand, Counselor, what you really said. Let's suppose that the Supreme Court issued, well, let's take Calais, the Calais decision. Okay, the Supreme Court ruled. Some like it, some don't. The president was not a party, nor was Chairman Grassley.
Mm-hmm.
If they disagree with Calais, the president or Chairman Grassley, can they just ignore it? Is that what you're saying?
No, I wouldn't say ignore it. They're obligated to carry the judgment into effect insofar as that.
Tell me what you do. I'm confused. I'm sorry. I agree with you. Everybody should pay attention to the Constitution.
Can I provide a concrete example from history?
No, because I'm running out of time. I'm sorry. We'll talk about this later. I just don't. Do you think any of us have the right to defy a federal court order?
Generally, no, with an exception.
What do you mean generally?
So there's an exception for orders issued in cases where the court lacks jurisdiction, setting that aside.
Wait, there's an exception for what?
If a court issues an order in a case in which it lacks jurisdiction, then parties are not bound by that order, but generally speaking, they are
Why
bound.
don't you just appeal it in that case?
You can do that, but the courts have...
So if in your opinion, the court didn't have jurisdiction, you can ignore it?
Again, generally, no, but there's a long-stated exception in the law that courts have recognized for when the lower court lacked jurisdiction. Now, I would never advise a client to do that, because if you're wrong...
I hope not.
Right.
I mean, this business of ignoring a federal court order is nonsense. It's nonsense on stilts. You may not agree with a court order. That's fine. This is America. You don't have to agree with it. You can. That's why God made courts of appeal. But you're not suggesting that we don't all have to give me an instance. I'm way over. Give me an instance where you think a federal court order could be ignored.
The only one of which I'm aware is if a court had no jurisdiction over the case and issues the order anyway, and you don't follow it, you cannot later be held in contempt for doing so. But aside from that, parties must follow court orders.
Who gets to determine, this is my last question, Mr. Chairman, you've been very patient. Who gets to determine whether they lack jurisdiction?
Effectively, the appeals court. That's why I would never advise a client to do this, because if you're wrong that they lack jurisdiction, then you're going to be held in contempt.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry, Mr. Schwartz, I didn't get to you.
Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you.
The three branches are co-equal. The idea that the Supreme Court is the final and infallible voice on everything is not in the Constitution. It's a power grab that's been allowed to fester for decades. Look at how liberal courts have twisted the Commerce Clause, invented rights out of thin air, and blocked common-sense policies on immigration, guns, and election integrity. We've seen presidents from both parties push back, and that's healthy for the Republic. Here it comes, the money line. Kennedy looks him dead in the eye. Do you think any of us have the right to defy a federal court order? The nominee starts hemming and hawing about, generally no, but then carves out exceptions if a court lacks jurisdiction. Kennedy keeps pressing. Who decides if they lack jurisdiction? This is exactly why we need more originalist America First judges. Patriots, the rule of law matters. No one should lightly defy court orders. But when courts overstep, issue nationwide injunctions from one activist judge in Hawaii or California blocking the entire country, or invent constitutional rights that our founders never dreamed of, we have a duty to push back through every lawful means. That includes strong executives who appeal aggressively, Congress that limits court jurisdiction where appropriate, and presidents who refuse to enforce blatantly unconstitutional rulings. Lincoln suspended habeas corpus. Jefferson questioned judicial supremacy. Andrew Jackson famously said the court made its decision. Now let it enforce it. The left only loves rule of law when it suits them. Remember when they cheered sanctuary cities, defying federal immigration law? Or when they ignored court rulings on school choice or religious liberty? Hypocrisy on steroids. Here's my valid take as a right-wing patriot. This hearing exposes why judicial nominations are so critical. We don't need more Ivy League elites who worship at the altar of judicial supremacy. We need judges who understand the Constitution as written, who respect the democratic will of the people, and who won't legislate from the bench. Benjamin Flowers seems intelligent and has some interesting views on departmentalism, but Kennedy was right to pin him down. In this day and age, with radical leftists trying to weaponize the courts against America First policies, border security, energy independence, election security, parental rights, we cannot afford ambiguity. Every federal official takes an oath to the Constitution, not to 9 justices. When the courts go rogue, the other branches have tools. That's not anarchy. That's the genius of our system designed to prevent tyranny, including judicial tyranny. Bottom line, patriots. Senator John Kennedy once again showed why he's one of the best in the Senate. He's asking the questions that cut through the legalese and get to the core of power in this republic. If you're tired of activist judges running roughshod over we the people, we need more fighters like Kennedy and more nominees who put the Constitution above leftist ideology. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Should presidents and Congress be able to push back against unconstitutional court rulings? Do you support departmentalism? Let me know. If you love this content, smash like, subscribe, turn on notifications, and share this with every patriot you know. We're in a battle for the soul of America, and the judiciary is ground zero. God bless Senator John Kennedy, God bless the United States Constitution, and God bless America. United States, I'll see you in the next video. Stay vigilant, stay informed, and keep fighting for freedom.